Right? The Quran has many types of miracles. It has linguistic miracles, the balagha and eloquence of the speech. Then it has scientific miracles, meaning things that science was able to verify later with technology that could not have possibly been known by a man of that time in the desert. No. Can you say, Qul huwa Allahu ahad? No. Right? Can you say, Qul huwa Allahu ahad? No. Why? Because today's accents are not from the original. But even that, Allah preserved through the Qur'an. That's how precise the Qur'an's preservation is. Ijma'an, by consensus of this ummah, no doubt to it. Tayyib, how much time do we have, Shaykh?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do this because I really want to do this before we end, which is talk about some of the miraculous verses from the Qur'an that you should use in your da'wah. Right? Because yes, one, you show the falsehood of their belief based on their Bible, but then you should also make sure you deliver the message to show the truthfulness of the Qur'an. Right? Now, I'm going to mention a few ayat and we'll go over, unfortunately due to time I'm not going to go over a lot, but I'll go over a few. And this first one is in Surah Al-Anbiya, which is the 21st surah, in the 33rd ayah. And many of you are doctors here, so this will be good for you to confirm for us, yeah? And it is He who created the night and the day and the sun and the moon and all the heavenly bodies in an orbit or swimming. So many of you that have PhDs and you research, you do realize that heavenly bodies, meaning planets, all have an orbit. Now, the moon's orbit is not it going across the sky, right? Because I'm not going into the flat earth thing here, but if we take the base of what scientists tell us, that the earth rotates, then the moon at night or the sun in the day moves not because of their orbit, but because of orbit or the turning of the earth, right? So how would you observe whether the moon orbits the planet, the earth? It's very difficult because you would have to check the place of the moon in different seasons throughout the year to look at whether it changes, right? So now the Prophet ﷺ could not have known that, but it is possible using basic human intelligence and eyes and observation to see it. But the sun's orbit is so slow that it cannot be observed by the human eye. In fact, even if you had telescopes, you couldn't observe the orbit of the sun. The sun orbits the center of the galaxy in such a slow orbit that until we sent out telescopes and huge satellites like the Hubble telescope, we were unable to verify whether the sun has an orbit as humanity. So until this century, we as humanity didn't know this. So how could the Prophet ﷺ in a desert more than 1400 years ago, with no telescopes, no satellites, have known the sun has an orbit? Again, the sun's orbit is not the sun going across the daytime. That's the rotation of the earth. The sun's orbit would be it orbiting around the middle or the center of the galaxy, which cannot be observed with the human eye, even with telescopes. So this is a miraculous. When we talk about scientific miracles, this is what we mean. Something that science has been able to verify today, using technology that could not have been known at that time. All right? Now, when we say this, a skeptic, and I like skeptics, we're not like Christians, we're not like shut up and believe, it's a mystery, no, we're not like that. They could say that he guessed at it, right? Well, you could guess something and get it right. All right. Let's go to Surah Al-Mu'minun, and this is in the 14th verse. So Surah Al-Mu'minun is the 23rd surah. It says, then we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot, right? So if you, as doctors, have seen an MRI or an ultrascan, and you look at the scan of an embryo that starts to develop, it becomes like a clot that clings to the side. Am I correct, doctors? All right. So, a clot, and we made the clot into a lump, and we made from the lump bones, and then we covered the bones with flesh. So bones started to develop first, and then around it, the muscles and flesh start to develop around the bones. Then we developed into a new creation. Blessed is Allah, the best of creators. Okay. Now, using ultrasound, using equipment today, we can actually see this. Before that time, how could he have known that? How could the Prophet ﷺ, without an ultrasound, without an MRI machine, without X-ray, without any, he didn't have X-ray vision, right? How would he have known that the embryo becomes a clot and how it clings? It's not something you can observe from the outside. Even if a woman has a miscarriage, you don't observe the clinging of the clot after a miscarriage. How could you have known that? And how the bones developed first, he would not have known. Right? You would have thought it was just flesh and then bones, right? So how would he have known that accurately? This is something that a skeptic could say, well, he guessed again and got it right again. All right, no problem. Now we go to Surah Nur, which is the 24th surah, 40th verse. It says, or like darknesses within the unfathomable sea, which is covered by waves upon which are waves. Now, this is very interesting. When you talk about the sea, the Prophet ﷺ never went to an ocean, right? He was around Jeddah, around Mecca, around Medina. He never went out to oceans, right? The closest he would get is the Red Sea, right? And even that, we don't have any hadith that the Prophet ﷺ went diving, and he went into the Red Sea. If anybody else finds one, let me know. I haven't seen one, right? So how would he know that there is a depth in the ocean that is an unimaginable, unfathomable darkness? Even when it's broad daylight up top, it's pitch black down, right? And this is the first thing, right? Because we today, using scuba gear and equipment and submarines, we know that even when it's midday up top, if you go deep enough into the ocean, it becomes pitch black. But without gear, how would he have known that? But let's say you said, you know what, somebody else went swimming and they checked and they were close and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But to know that there are waves underneath the ocean, not just on top, you could not have known. You just didn't have the equipment. Right? So how could the Prophet ﷺ have known that? We cannot just keep saying he guessed and got it right every time. And that's a mathematical impossibility. You're going to guess some things, you're going to get it right, you're going to get it wrong. So if you get it right every time, then that doesn't happen. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go over the other ones. Well, I'll go over one more. Because we have a lot of doctors, so I like the scientific stuff. In Surah Zumar, this is the 39th surah, in the 6th verse. And he created you in the womb of your mothers, creation after creation, within 3 veils of darknesses. 3 covering darknesses. Now, when I was studying myself, and you know, this was interestingly, I do remember studying some of this, but because, I left school a long time ago, I'd forgotten. But recently, I was in a conference that I was listening to a speaker, online conference. And they were talking about certain infectious diseases and how it affects children and so on. And they started talking about the effect on a pregnant woman, and it talked about the child. So on that aspect, they talked about the development of the fetus and so on, and they mentioned the 3 coverings, right? From that, the ayah clicked in my head, right? So I went back to this, I marked it up, right? So there is the anterior abdominal wall, then there's the uterine wall, and then the aminochronic membrane, right? So these are 3 covers, 3 veils that cover where the embryo develops. 3 darknesses, 3 veils, right there in the Quran. How could the Prophet ﷺ have known this? Right? So these are what we would consider clear miracles that show that he was revealed something that with the technology of the time that is impossible for him to have known. But I'll mention one more just for the sake of time, which is a historic miracle. Right? The Quran has many types of miracles. It has linguistic miracles, the balagha and eloquence of the speech. Then it has scientific miracles, meaning things that science was able to verify later with technology that could not have possibly been known by a man of that time in the desert, in that environment. Then there are historic prophecies and miracles, and this is in Surah Rum, right in the beginning, where after Alif Lam Mim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the people of Rum, the Byzantine, were defeated in the nearest land, but they, after the defeat, will overcome. And within 3 to 9 years, the ba'id which is mentioned here. Now, looking at this, and I have a video with ChatGPT on this, by the way, just to ask ChatGPT, could this have been known? Because this was revealed around Badr, and we look at the context of the Roman defeat around 615, right? It was such that even Jerusalem and Damascus had fallen, that Antioch had fallen, that it was unimaginable that they will make a comeback. Even ChatGPT says this, right? So now, when this is revealed, the Romans are being defeated. They're being slaughtered, they're being put down. To say that within this time period will be a comeback could not have been known, right? But subhanallah, exactly 3 years later, the Romans began their offensive again in 618. And in 624, 9 years, this is the exact period given, the Romans, they defeated the birthplace of Zoroaster, and they began the ultimate destruction of the Persians from there. Right? So now how could the Prophet ﷺ have known that? That this turnaround would happen and give the exact time period. Right? And this is in the Quran, but even in Hadith we have many historic miracles, like what the Shaykh was mentioning about the signs of the Day of Judgment and how many of them have come true, including the fall of Constantinople, including the fall of the Persian Empire, including many of these signs that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in Hadith, that all these prophecies came true to show this is a true prophet with a true message.